When I turned 18, my stepfather kicked me out without a second thought. "You're nothing. Go struggle like you should," he sneered. My mother stood by, saying nothing. I walked away with only the clothes on my back. 5 years later, he bombards me with voicemails, pleading, sobbing, desperate. I won't lift a finger to help him. When I turned 18, my stepfather kicked me out without a second thought. I can still hear the cold finality in his voice as he barked, "You're nothing. Go struggle like you should," while my mother, frozen in silent complicity, simply watched from the doorway. In that instant, everything I believed about family and protection shattered. I stepped out into the world with nothing but the clothes on my back and an aching emptiness that I couldn't quite explain. The first night on the unforgiving streets was a haze of bitter wind and raw isolation. I found shelter under a creaking overhang in a rundown part of town, where the only comfort came from the intermittent glow of a street lamp. Every gust of wind felt like a cruel reminder that I was now truly alone. With each passing hour, the city transformed from an indifferent maze of concrete and neon into a vast expanse of trials that would test my very spirit. The early days were a blur of scavenging for odd jobs and enduring countless nights in transient. Refugees, sometimes a grimy bench in a park, other times the narrow backseat of a car that someone had left unlocked. Hunger gnawed at me relentlessly, and the chill of winter seeped into my bones with a cruelty that no one should ever have to experience. Despite the relentless hardships, there was an unexpected beauty in the struggle. I encountered kind souls, a street artist who shared his meager meal, a homeless veteran who taught me how to stay warm using discarded newspapers, and even a retired teacher who lent me his collection of books, insisting that knowledge could be the beacon out of the darkness. These fleeting moments of human kindness were like rare oases in a barren desert, reminding me that even when the world seems to have forsaken you, fragments of hope remain. As the weeks turned into months, I realized that survival required more than just brute resilience. It demanded a transformation of the self. I began to see every setback as an opportunity to learn. I took up odd jobs that ranged from washing dishes in a cramped diner to assisting a local mechanic who was more interested in sharing life lessons than fixing engines. With every challenge, I became more resourceful, more determined to redefine my existence on my own terms. In the quiet moments between exhaustion and fleeting hope, I would write in a battered notebook, recording every triumph and every despair. It was through these scribbled words that I slowly began to understand that the pain of abandonment was only a fragment of my story, not its totality. The turning point came when I managed to secure a modest scholarship at a community college. With my newfound academic sanctuary, late nights spent poring over textbooks replaced the endless cycle of fear and hunger. In the dim light of the library, surrounded by the murmur of diligent students, I discovered that education was not merely a means to an end but a lifeline to a better future. My professors, though unaware of my past, recognized a raw determination in me that went beyond mere grades. I found camaraderie among classmates who, like me, carried silent burdens and dreams of escape from the hardships of their past. Together, we forged an unspoken pact. Each one of us a survivor, each one of us determined to rise above the circumstances that had once defined us. During this transformative period, I began to piece together a semblance of a life that felt authentic. I rented a small room in a rundown apartment building, its creaks and groans a constant reminder of impermanence, yet a space that was finally mine. I balanced classes with part-time work, my days a frenetic blend of lectures, shift work, and self-study. There were moments when despair threatened to overwhelm me. The memories of that fateful day, the bitter taste of rejection, the loneliness of nights when even sleep offered no respite. But in those moments, I found strength in the realization that every hardship was slowly forging me into someone unbreakable. Every time I walked past a mirror and saw not just the scars of my past, but the determination in my eyes, I felt a surge of defiance against the cruelty that had once sought to define me. Then, 5 years after that painful day, the past came, calling in the form of a series of unexpected voicemails. It started subtly, a brief, halting message that I initially dismissed as the ramblings of a man long estranged from reality. But soon, The messages grew longer, imbued with a desperation that was impossible to ignore. His voice, once so full of contempt and derision, now trembled with a sorrow that bordered on genuine remorse. In those messages, my stepfather pleaded for forgiveness, for a chance to make amends, for a lifeline back into a life he had long since abandoned. Each voicemail was a raw, unedited confession, the words tumbling out in fits and starts, laden with regret and a haunted acknowledgement of his past mistakes. Listening to those voicemails sent me spiraling into a vortex of conflicting emotions. On one hand, there was a spark of pity, a brief, almost imperceptible whisper of sympathy for the man who now seemed as lost as I once was. On the other, there was an unyielding anger, a searing reminder of the years I had spent battling the consequences of his cruelty. I found myself replaying those messages over and over, each iteration dredging up memories I had fought so hard to bury. The voice on the other end was a ghost from a past that had taught me to be wary of false promises and empty regrets. It was as if time had conspired to bring him back into my life, only to test the strength of the person I had become. In the solitude of my modest apartment, I sat for hours, the phone clutched tightly in my hand as I grappled with the decision of whether to respond. Every instinct screamed that engaging with him would be a betrayal of all the suffering I had endured. Yet, a small, persistent voice in the back of my mind argued that perhaps forgiveness could be a path to closure, a chance to break the cycle of pain that had haunted both our lives. I wrestled with the notion that forgiveness might somehow erase the memories of every bitter night, every pang of hunger, every tear shed in the dark. But deep down, I knew that forgiving him would not be a gesture of weakness, but rather an acknowledgement that my journey was about reclaiming my power, not reliving my past. After days of relentless internal debate, I made a decision that felt both final and liberating. I recorded a response, a message that was succinct, resolute, and devoid of any trace of the vulnerability that might invite further intrusion into my hard-earned peace. In that recording, I laid down the boundaries that had been forged through years of struggle and self-discovery. I acknowledged the pain of my past, the scars that would always be a part of me, but I made it clear that I would not allow his pleas to undo the strength I had built. The message was not an act of cruelty, but an affirmation that some wounds were too deep to heal with empty apologies. Sending that message was like severing a final brittle tether to a life I had long outgrown. As I pressed send, I felt an indescribable release. A weight that had anchored me to memories of betrayal and isolation began to lift. The voicemails, once a relentless echo of my past, gradually faded into the background, replaced by the steady rhythm of a life that I had rebuilt with my own two hands. In the weeks and months that followed, I immersed myself in the work that had once seemed like a lifeline, studies, new projects, and relationships that were defined not by shared pain, but by mutual growth and understanding. Looking back now, I see that the journey from abandonment to self-reclamation was fraught with peril, heartbreak, and moments of profound doubt. Yet every step, every agonizing night and triumphant day was a stitch in the tapestry of the person I have become. I have learned that closure is not something granted by those who hurt you, but something you earn by forging ahead, no matter how steep the path. The story of my life is not defined by the cruelty of a man who once deemed me expendable, but by the relentless spirit that refused to be broken. In the quiet solitude of reflection, I understand that forgiveness is a luxury I can choose to withhold, not out of spite, but out of a deep respect for the journey I undertook on my own terms. Now, as I sit by my window on cool, crisp evenings and watch the city lights flicker like distant stars, I am filled with a profound sense of liberation. I have transformed every painful memory into a stepping stone, every moment of despair into a lesson in resilience. The scars remain, silent, testimonies of battles fought and the relentless will to survive, but they no longer define me. I am the sum of every choice I made in the face of adversity, the countless times I refused to surrender to a destiny written by someone else's cruelty. My life is a testament to the strength of the human spirit, a reminder that even when the world turns its back, the fire within can illuminate the darkest of nights. And so, I move forward with a heart that, though marked by pain, beats with the unwavering conviction that every ending is simply the beginning of a new, uncharted chapter.